I'm John Giever for MedPage Today. At a press conference at Quad AI today, Dr. Daniel Jackson of the University of Wisconsin presented some surprising findings on the origins of asthma. Rhinoviral wheezing illnesses are a powerful predictor of asthma in very young, high-risk children.
The data I'm going to be discussing this morning was actually generated from the Childhood Origins of Asthma, or COAST project. COAST is actually a longitudinal birth cohort study that's looking at various environmental and immunologic risk factors for the subsequent development of asthma and other atopic diseases. The children that we're studying in COAST are at high risk for asthma secondary to family histories of allergies and/or asthma. And this morning I'm going to focus primarily on the role of viral respiratory infections in early childhood and the subsequent risk for asthma. So a little bit of background, viral respiratory illnesses that are associated with wheezing are very common in early childhood, and some but not all children who wheeze with those infections subsequently develop asthma. So the initial hypothesis of COAST was actually that moderate to severe respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, infections would be associated with an increased risk of subsequent asthma development. But surprisingly, we actually demonstrated that kids who wheezed with rhinovirus during infancy were actually associated with an increased risk of persistent wheezing through age 3. However, whether that relationship would hold true for asthma at age 6 was unclear. To examine this, we obtained nasal lavage samples during viral respiratory wheezing illnesses during the first 3 years of life. And then we utilized conventional methods as well as advanced viral diagnostics, including multiplex PCR, to assess the specific viral etiology of those wheezing illnesses. We then evaluated the children for allergic sensitization with RAS testing yearly and diagnosed asthma at age 6. The sort of major findings of our study are as follows. First of all, we were able to identify a viral etiology for 90% of the wheezing illnesses during year 1 through 3. And rhinovirus was actually the most common virus that we detected during those wheezing illnesses. 28% of the children in COAST were diagnosed with asthma at age 6, and the following are the primary risk factors that we demonstrated for that asthma development. First of all, rhinovirus wheezing and aeroallergen sensitization in the first 3 years were both associated with increased asthma risk, and their association was independent of one another. The next thing we were able to do is actually corroborate the findings of the Tucson respiratory study and show that respiratory syncytial virus wheezing illnesses during the first 3 years of life were actually associated with an increased risk of asthma, and that risk was about 3-fold. But a new and really important finding of COAST is that we actually demonstrated that rhinovirus wheezing illnesses, either alone or in combination with a history of wheezing with RSV, were associated with a more dramatic, approximately 10-fold increased risk of asthma at age 6. So in summary, in our high-risk birth cohort, we demonstrated that both rhinovirus wheezing illnesses and aeroallergen sensitization are associated with an increased risk of asthma at age 6. And then most importantly, from a clinical perspective, we demonstrated that rhinovirus wheezing illnesses anytime during the first 3 years of life were associated with a more dramatic risk of asthma, and they were the strongest predictor of asthma in our cohort.
I'm John Giever, MedPage Today.